Thought I'd run through a battle report that myself and Steve, for a game that myself and Steve played a couple of weeks ago. So we're playing through the Gemblow Gap scenarios that the two Fat Lardies created as part of one of their pint-sized campaigns. So this is early war 1940, Germany attacking through Belgium towards France. But we're not playing using chain of command, we're using the Battlegroup rules. So as I said, about 400 points here. You can see the French deployed in the top left corner. We're playing attack, counter-attack. But we made a couple of modifications to the scenario. So the first modification is that Steve, who's playing the French, has 2 free engineering units. So there are, I think, about 10 engineers in a truck. And the reason for that is this scenario, this second scenario from the Gemblow Gap pint-sized campaign, the task for the French force is to try and blow 2 culverts. So the one where they're deploying there on the left-hand side, and the one down the bottom of the map, where the little river is running on the road there. So obviously that can't really be a win condition in Battlegroup. So we decided that if they're successful, they'll draw, that the Germans will have to draw a chit that goes against their battle rating. So they're 2 free engineer units on top of the 400-point force. Steve has a couple of Charbis, I think they are, on the road there. You can see there's a couple of man-packed or man-pushed guns that he's going to slowly roll into position. So Steve had first turn. You can also see he's put down some defences on the right-hand side, or roadblocks on the right-hand side. So the tank ditches, there's a roadblock to try and slow the Germans down. So certainly it forces the Germans to kind of manoeuvre around it. We've put out our objectives, so you can see there are 2 objectives that were placed by the Germans, one in the field just north of those roadblocks, one then near the culvert to the south. There's one in the big building in the centre there in the French lines, and there's one at the intersection of the road. So with the French turn, they moved forward. The engineering unit are in that truck, so they're starting to head towards that culvert, and the 2 French tanks getting themselves into position while the guns get rolling forward. The Germans, used Panzermarsch, so that allowed me to bring on a good few units, so I get an extra D6 units on the turn where I choose to use that ability. So I brought in a number of my Panzer IIIs, brought in my Luftwaffe observer, so that's in the half track that's just beside the group of trees near the road there. And there's the other half track has a squad and an MG in it. The AT gun has also been towed up to behind that hill, and they'll be dropped on top of that hill as soon as I get a chance. The tank up the top is a little bit of an exposed position, certainly facing down 2 reasonably well gunned French tanks. So we see if it survives. Oh well, as you can see, it doesn't. So one of the tanks took it out, needing moderate dice, but succeeded in spotting it and hitting it. The other tank went on to ambush, while a few more tanks were brought on and started to move up. There's also a jeep carrying some artillery observers. They've just been deployed on the edge of the board there. Steve didn't get enough orders to order everything he wanted. And you can see the engineers have been dropped out of that truck and have already started to plant the explosives. So, he's in a good position to start moving things forward. As you can see, we've each grabbed an objective at this point. So Steve had grabbed the crossroads, and the Panzer III that was destroyed had also grabbed one. So we're starting to draw some chits here. So the Germans were reasonably conservative at the last turn, trying to stay out of position. So let's see what I did next. So next up, you can see more of my force begins to arrive on the right-hand side along the road. Got the Pack 36, I think it is, deployed on top of that hill. Half-track moved down, was able to drop some infantry out. Again, grabbing another objective. Not necessarily getting any fire on top of the engineers yet from the infantry in the building, but the MG certainly got some fire on them. And did some suppressing fire and managed to pin them on top of that, which isn't good news for them because they're now sitting on top of a timed explosive without necessarily the ability to pull off of it quickly. So that's not the best position. My Luftwaffe observers jumped out of the vehicle. I had a Ju-87 come in. Well, it was due to come in, but it didn't arrive. So I have another one due to arrive next turn, so hopefully it'll be a little bit more effective. But the German turn was fairly muted, other than the bit of action down the south there. The French are pushing forward fairly aggressively, the tanks getting moving, pushing down the road, starting to cover off positions where the German tanks are, putting some shots on the Luftwaffe observer team, limiting their ability, so reducing the reliability of that Ju-87 when it comes in next turn. The French had also dropped some artillery observers into that central building, grabbing that objective. And things went bad for the engineers. It exploded, the charge that they placed on the covert, which forced me as a German player to draw a chit, but it also caused quite a lot of damage to that unit, and they bugged out. So not good news for the engineers there. But the French looking in a reasonably good position here at the moment. The Germans being a little bit kind of constrained with what they're doing. But things can change quickly in this game. So the troops in the building down the south put shots into the truck that had transported the engineers. But the big news for this turn was the arrival of the Stuka. It got very lucky. It was due to arrive at the crossroads where the French objective is there, where the truck is. But it actually deviated down towards the two tanks on the road. I managed to destroy both of those and pin another tank, so really very effective bit of aircraft arrival. So they're unreliable. I mean, they're 15 points. For me, it would arrive on a 5 or more because the Luftwaffe observer communications officer was pinned. But it allowed me to get it into quite a good position here. And so Steve was hurting there. I mean, several chits being drawn, the tank now being pinned, so he's not in the best position at all. So more engineers arriving for the French on the left-hand side, this time placing their explosives on that culvert. Hopefully they'll be able to get away before it explodes. Artillery guns being pushed up a little bit further. One of the French tanks had been pinned, so it stayed in position and was unpinned at the end of the turn. The other one backed away. I think Steve started to feel the pressure of several Panzer IIIs beginning to bear down on top of him. So things had turned for the French in the last turn, and Steve certainly reacted in a defensive way, just trying to shore up, get his tanks to cover where possible, and get those engineers into position. And things ended up finishing here. One of the reasons Steve had been so defensive is that his battle rating was very, very low. So I started to put a little bit more hurt out there, and that was enough for him to draw a chit and essentially end the game. So the French, had a reasonably good position for half of that game, but the Germans just, I think, got really lucky with the aircraft strike on that turn. Otherwise, I think I was playing very conservatively. I didn't fancy rolling my tanks out into the French tanks that were already sitting in position and ready just to hit me with open fire orders and really destroy tanks that were rolling out. So, positional play matters. So I think between ambush and getting my tanks kind of just held back in case the French came forward, I think it was a reasonably good move. Having the Pak 36 at the back, while I don't think it did any damage, it may have helped to pin that tank in the field there. Certainly, it's a long-range deterrent. It's very hard for the French tanks to take out at that range. The odds of hitting something and doing damage is low, but it's still there. So getting it up on that hill, I think, was quite good. The troops in the south, I think, were very effective at dissuading the engineers. I think all told, both sides played well, but the luck of the draw literally fell on the German side. The numbers I drew for my chits were quite low, but for Steve, he clocked up his force morale quite quickly. But there was quite a difference in the overall battle ratings for the armies. So I think the French were quite low, maybe 23, 26 total, and the Germans were closer to 33, 36. So there was a 10 battle rating difference between the two forces, which really is quite telling. All right, hope you enjoyed that very quick battle report. We're still really enjoying Battlegroup. It's a fantastic game. But until next time, take care.